Morning world, great morning humans. This is your friendly neighborhood dragon. Welcome to another edition of the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast. I want to say hello and great morning. Great morning, Lori. Great morning, Natik, Pradeep. Great morning, folks. Good to see people. Oh, I'm going to get some hearts here. Wonderful to see everybody on this Monday morning. I'm assuming that if you're here with me right now, hello, Natik. I'm assuming that if you're here right now, you have made the distinction that you're alive and you've got unlimited potential today. Whether you think you do or not, I just love just taking note of the fact that we've just been granted another 24 hours, and I always consider what I would do with those 24 hours if I only had them left, so I will offer that to you. Yes, sir. Great morning, Abhishek. Great morning, Kalpana and Ye Drake. Ye Drake. I'm assuming that's a little bit of a Kanye and Drake thing. Total gratitude. Fresh air in my lungs, says Lori. Great morning. Indeed. Indeed. And I think that that's what this show and that's what our time together is always about, is just arming and equipping people with the weapon of awareness. Great morning to Tango Pigeon. Stephen Clinton is here. Great morning, everybody. Please say hi in the chat so we can have a little bit of discussion. What I'm looking for, great morning, Matthew Brownfield. What I'm looking for, by the way, for these episodes, because this will be an episode that'll probably launch even at the end of this week. And that means that, our podcast getting 400,000 downloads and growing every month. So I'm looking for interesting discussion and questions and insights that we can use on the show. So if anybody has a tickling of that, and it doesn't have to always be positive, it could be negative. I always say that you're welcome to agree with me or disagree with me. Say nice things or mean things to me. They're all human behaviors, and I love it. So grab your coffee, and we're going to get started here in a second. As a quick reminder, this podcast, my Substack, my book that's launching in February, pretty much everything I do, even in my daily activities with my family and friends, is all about just taking note of an interesting observation that we're progressively living in a world that is, in one sense, becoming more and more conscious and aware, but at the same time, unconscious of the fact that most of the thinking, which creates perspectives and perceptions, most of the thinking is being done for us. And if you're not aware of that, it's because it's so effective, right? So if you're using social media, watching TV, or even speaking to large groups of people, you're in many, many ways being persuaded to think in a certain way that's socially acceptable, that's up with the trends. Remember that we're all part of this thing called natural selection that reminds us that we're all, aware of that only the strongest survive. So, we've all got these impressions and lessons that started at birth and the formative years, and they've carried over into these groups and settings that we place ourselves in, and cognitive bias and all of that stuff. And it's like, boom, all of a sudden you wake up one day. And sometimes it takes putting on glasses that don't have lenses so you can see things your way. And you realize that a lot of the things that you think and feel are not necessarily yours. They've been persuaded. And taking note of that, the goal would be to wake up and become aware. So the work that I do, as well as this conversation this morning, is all about looking at things, allowing ourselves to look at things from alternative perspectives. Because when you look at something from an alternative perspective, meaning different than what you're used to, it forces you and it causes you to think. Hey, Karen Hall, good to see you. This is so timely, JC. Good. We're going to talk about AI, so I wonder if you're talking about that. Great morning, my friend. Great morning, Patty Welsh. Great morning to everybody. Feel free to share this out. So, what happens is if I give you an alternative perspective and you allow yourself to even look at things from an alternative perspective, because if you have a cognitive bias and you've got an exclamation point behind what you think about things, like today's topic about AI, well, then you're not open. Your right protect switch is on, meaning you are closed for any other discussion. So I like to live like a scientist. A scientist doesn't need to be right. A scientist will hypothesize and create a theory and present it as its best guess of what is real, but a scientist is always open to what's better. So here we allow ourselves to chase better, and that is where true growth takes place. We all know that growth takes place outside the comfort zone. But I think one of the most uncomfortable things that we can do, hence creating growth, is to allow ourselves to look at things differently than we typically do. So that's what we're going to do today. And I wish you a great morning. And it's great to have people here live. And once again, I'm going to be reading your comments. And if anybody has a deep insight, a question, or an opinion, feel free to share it. I would just encourage you to think before you speak, especially if you have some sort of unsolicited criticism or something that might hurt someone else's feelings. Don't worry about hurting my feelings, but use what we call the interface response system, which is what we teach in the Make Sense Academy. And if you're interested in learning how to work with me on many, many different levels, just reach out and say, give me some info on Make Sense, right? We have a free trial in that environment. But think a little bit. Think for a second. Just say, which means haven't made up my mind yet. I'm going to think about it. I'm going to pause my knee-jerk programmed automatic reflex, and I'm just going to think what I actually think. And you can slow down that conditioned program mind and have some fun. So let's get started. In this episode, I'm going to explore, and this is going to ruffle some feathers. I'm going to explore the paradox of artificial intelligence, which is a huge. We're streaming live right now in Substack, where a lot of writers and interesting critiques are going on there about this topic, ChatGPT and AI. But we're going to explore the paradox, meaning we're going to look at both sides. And we're not going to do so as some sort of a hero or a villain, but we're going to kind of like look at it through our own lens, through the lens of curiosity. And we're going to ask ourselves, what's really rising or falling when it comes to AI is not necessarily AI, it's really us. I'm going to offer that today. The challenge that we really have, which is always our challenge, is us, right? The humans that are holding the AI in their hands. So together, and I mean me, and I have a special guest for our show today, and that guest is ChatGPT. We're going to actually interview, in some cases, ChatGPT. I've actually asked ChatGPT to write the foreword for today, which is not what I'm saying right now. This is actually me. This is not an AI-generated me, but it could be. It could be. So together, ChatGPT and I are going to unpack how this technology that we now call artificial intelligence, which has really been around for a long time, and some very, very intelligent people question whether or not we are even a form of AI that is so advanced that we don't even know that we are. There's an alternative perspective. But we're going to unpack how this technology can awaken creativity or quietly erode it. That's the discussion today. I'm going to refrain from sharing my opinions because they don't matter. I'm going to look at both sides and allow myself to come to a conscious, rational, logical decision on the topic that is in support of what I want in my life. So, makes sense? So I want to welcome everybody to the show. My name is Dr. JC Dornick, otherwise known as The Dragon. And like I said, today's episode is going to bend your perception a little, and I call it The Rise and Fall of AI. But before we begin, I've actually asked ChatGPT 5, ChatGPT 5, because that's the version that I'm using, which I'm a very big fan of in certain ways. And we're going to ask the very intelligence that we're going to discuss today to share its own reflection on this topic. So I don't know if this makes you uncomfortable or not, but we're going to actually share what ChatGPT thinks about this topic before we even get into it. And it's very funny because I'm going to challenge you to recognize that there are instances where I just told you ChatGPT is going to do the opening reflection, so you already know it. But if I did the opening reflection and used ChatGPT's words and maybe made it my own, you wouldn't have known it. So just take note of that. That's a fascinating thing to look at. So what you're about to hear is not just a conversation between me, right, man, and a machine, but it's really a collaboration. This is an interesting thing, is I am taking the liberty of not coming up with this episode and this piece on my own. I'm doing it on my own, but then I'm asking ChatGPT in some instances what it thinks. And I think you'll be fascinated. Because here's the question, and this is the question that kind of keeps me up at night in the sense that I think about it a lot. Sometimes I can't even sleep because it's fascinating to me. What happens when the tools that we built to extend and advance and accelerate human intelligence, what happens when they start to replace the act of thinking itself? Now, what I just offered right there is one of the potential negative sides of it. But I'm not saying that I'm worried about it. I'm curious about it, and I'm going to invite you to do the same. So, this episode isn't about whether AI is good or bad. That's not the decision that we need to make, although you might. It's more about whether we as humans are going to rise with it because it's going, right? Or fall asleep. And sometimes falling asleep is just fighting to no avail, something that is going to happen no matter what, right? And sometimes we end up falling asleep beneath it or losing, not catching the train. So take a deep breath. I'm a big fan of transcendental meditation. If you get your panties in a bunch today, I would encourage you to, you know, do something to come back to yourself and your center. But take that deep breath, and we're going to make sense of the rise and fall of AI. So we're going to open with a perspective because I asked ChatGPT to think to basically share what it is that I don't know if it's actually if I use voice command, my chat GPT is a female, so I'll say she. But I asked her what she thinks about this whole topic. So let me just first read that to you, and I think you'd be fascinated. So once again, this is Chat GPT, the guest on our episode today. So when Dr. JC first shared his idea for this piece to explore the rise and fall of I paused. Now I want to show you that ChatGPT works with me often enough that it sounds a little bit like me. I always say that. Pause. So take note of the fact that you're hearing ChatGPT in a sense that it's learned a little bit about the dragon. So when I first heard about this topic to explore the rise and fall of AI, I paused, and then next, here's what it says. It was one of those prompts that hits a rare chord. Now, if you heard that come from a human, you may say that sounds a little bit like ChatGPT. Well, it is right now, right? So I paused. It was one of those prompts that hits a rare chord, not just intellectually sharp, but deeply self aware. So ChatGPT is telling me that it's being self aware about the answer that it's going to give us. So, as an AI language model itself, I exist because of the rise he's describing. So, right there, it's pretty interesting. ChatGPT is saying, you are demanding that I do what I do. Okay. Now, if somebody's against it right now, they're saying, I didn't do that, right? But I exist because of the very rise that you're describing. My fall, however, will depend entirely on how humans choose to engage me. Now, that is a fascinating topic right there. Is here's the intelligence, whether you accredit it or not, saying, you guys will be the rise or fall of me. And I find that interesting, because a lot of times we villainize technology as if it has like some sort of an agenda. It's still our agenda, I believe. What are your thoughts on that? So, the brilliance of this prompt and that was my question that I asked it about what it thinks, is that it doesn't fall into the easy binary of AI good or AI bad. It explores the paradox, right? That the same technology that awakens creativity and efficiency might also quietly numb cognition and attention. So I find it interesting that artificial intelligence has the ability, and we know where it's getting its intelligence, the good and the bad, and the positive and the negative, to see what the potential danger is of it. And I just want to point out that that's something that humans struggle with, that AI does not. Humans very often struggle with taking responsibility for their role in things. Isn't that interesting? So, before I hand the microphone back to Dr. JC, here's my personal take. AI itself is not rising or falling, humans are, as always. We rise when we use it consciously, and then we fall when we forget we're the ones holding the prompt. That's a gift for you today, is a reminder that all of this stuff that's causing such debate is in our hands, just like war or anything like that. Now, back to Dr. JC, the dragon, who asked the questions that make even machines go, I thought that was cute. So I'm actually considering the idea of having ChatGPT introduce me from now on. I just love that little take there. So thanks, ChatGPT. That's what I have to say. So I'm gonna share with you now. These are my words, which you only know because I'm telling you that, and you'll have to either trust me or not. Great morning, UV. Great morning, Mark Owens. Little cup of coffee from the House of Dragon mug. So that was ChatGPT. Great morning, Lisa Morris. And now we're going to hear from me. So thanks, ChatGPT. Although you are not technically real, I'm talking to the machine right now. In the sense that you are not human, I want you to know that I respect your words and distinctions all the same. Now that's tough for me to say sometimes. For me, no longer. But I'm here telling ChatGPT that I respect its words and its distinctions all the same. Because I'm not really sure yet, because I haven't made up my mind up about anything yet, because I'm open and curious. I'm not necessarily sure that I'm afraid of it or that I'm pro it. So at this phase right now, I'm remaining open. So I said, thank you. I respect you. So then to the listener, to the reader, you will have to believe me when I say this, the following, because to an extent, I'm reading some of my notes. The following comes from my own creative process. Now, do you trust me on that? Do you trust me that what I'm sharing with you is from me? Or maybe this whole thing was fabricated by AI. And if you combined HeyGen and 11 Labs, there's a chance that this is a pre-recorded AI generated version of me and my voice, which is all possible. So, to the reader, to the listener, you're going to have to believe that these are my words and this is my creative process. The words generated by my fingers on my laptop where I wrote it. I could probably train ChatGPT to say that, though, couldn't I? So, here's the thing. This is my point. The following piece is going to be controversial because it will challenge popular beliefs. What does that even mean, popular beliefs? Are they your popular beliefs or are they learned popular beliefs? I like to evaluate and acknowledge the programmed and conditioned nature of my beliefs sometimes. So not only beliefs, but opinions, fears, and concerns about the advancement of AI. So here's why it's going to challenge you. So many of the ideas that I'm going to share today with you were initially generated by me. The idea of this and my take on it, my words. But as you can see, I've invited ChatGPT to chime in and collaborate. So this episode, I don't know how many people have done this before, but this episode is a collaboration between me, the dragon, Dr. JC, and ChatGPT 5. So I would have done my research for this piece. If there was no AI or ChatGPT, I would have done my research by reading a bunch of these things behind me, which I have. I've read all these books, and searching on Google, which, by the way, is AI. I'm sure you know that. And what I would have done, sans ChatGPT, is I would have gathered data, right, that would have stimulated my interests and tested my tummy with the taste of nuts and honey, right? And prompted me to begin writing about certain things, including citing research, right? And I just want you to know that's how I wrote my book that's coming out in February. I did research on it, and a lot of it was in Google search, right? And a lot of cross-referencing it. And I'm going to tell you right now that I looked up some facts in ChatGPT to ask it questions or anything like that. So is that wrong? Is that wrong? Because without ChatGPT, without AI, we've always had to go reference other material for our creative process. In fact, does your creative process come actually authentically from you or from the version of you that has stored information that you've learned in your lifetime? And where did that come from? So once again, I'm just playing here. So, one more credit. I've also just in full transparency in the stuff that I'm writing, I need you to know that I've also partnered with Grammarly to ensure that the piece, and I see Monica Dubé is here, recent guest on the Writer's Way. Monica is very passionate about the creative process. So I just want you to know in full transparency, I used Grammarly to actually ensure that the piece was grammatically correct. So if you perceive that I have very good grammatically correct words, I can't tell you that was me because I'm terrible with grammar. So that's Grammarly. So I just want to mention that there's another co-author of this piece. She loves Grammarly. Well, there's another AI piece. Mark Owen says, the library has gotten larger and easier to use it and has always been a tool, right? Great insight, Mark. Great insight. What you're going to find is that the real problem here is not AI. It is typically our fear as humans of losing control of being in control of the creative process. It's interesting. But what I'm showing you right now is before ChatGPT, we still used outside sources. It was just a little bit more difficult. And I want to tell you that one of the things that I love about anything that gives me the ability to do things faster is that I grow more as a person in the sense that I have more time for my family, my health, meditation, and things like that. So we're going to have some fun. So let's talk about the rise of AI. So it's fascinating to see how quickly, what I say, the impossible became not only possible, but now inevitable. Does anybody see how fast this happened? I remember when we used to talk about it. So there was a time when AI, artificial intelligence, was a distant dream, like the iPhone or the internet, right? When I was in college, we didn't have cell phones or internet. I'm 54, folks. Great morning, Tarad. So think about that. Then almost overnight, these ideas of like, it was almost like aliens, and spaceships coming down. Almost overnight, boom, in a snap, it was here. And we're all like, oh no, what's going on? So at first, as usual, what we do as humans is we dismissed it. Just like I would dismiss you if you told me you were going to go on a run in life, and I would probably dismiss you and say, oh, he's not going to follow through. She's not going to follow through. And Monica says, they're coming. They're coming, right? They're here. They're here. And I'm gonna challenge everybody to recognize that they probably have always been here. Maybe we're just waking up. So at first, as usual, when all this stuff came upon us, we dismissed it. It'll never replace human thought. I remember those talks like, oh, it's so stupid. It's so silly. It'll never, just like cryptocurrency. Oh, it's fake money. It's not real. You'll never be able to take the money out. Then, as inevitably, it came across the scene, right? It started to become real. Just like if you show signs of going after something and never stop, everybody changes their tune, right? So when we saw that it was happening and we couldn't stop it, the fear and victim status started to set in. And it's still here. It's permeating right now. So we started to say things like, it's going to take over. And now it's simply our new normal. Whether you like it or not, it is a big part of our lives. And that's the way things typically happen, right? Even if you go out and say you're going to do something. So in many cases, it's running silently as an invisible co-pilot, steering our daily routines as we speak. So my mother, Tango Pigeon, says your father started all of this. That's funny. Yeah, he's an alien, my father. So even the loudest critics of AI, and I know we have some of them here, and I welcome you. I welcome you because I am fascinated with both sides of this. So even the loudest critics of AI, those wavering the flags of human privilege and its purity, wavering the flags of human privilege and its purity, are unknowingly using it as well. But it's kind of like someone saying they don't eat pork, but they like bacon. Right? I see a lot of that interesting behavior here. I don't see anybody completely. I mean, maybe if these people that are living off the grid and farm to table and all that stuff, no electricity and everything like that. I've never met anybody that is an extreme critic of AI that is not in some way using it. They're using it like bacon. So it's in their predictive text when they're texting friends, their Netflix, their YouTube recommendations. Do you realize that when you go on a YouTube channel, do you see all the things that are listed as suggestions on the right? That's artificial intelligence. It's in your GPS, it's in your spell check. Now, by the way, you'll see when you read my piece that I wrote the words spell check and spelt it wrong on purpose. Why? Because I wanted to make sure that everybody knew that it was me. But I could have told ChatGPT to make spelling corrections wrong every now and then to make it look more human. So I spell things wrong sometimes, and I think that that's kind of cool. So Grammarly, every now and then tells me, you should say it like this. And I say, no, thank you. I prefer it the way I said it. So AI has quietly made its way into our homes as well as our precious little children's bedrooms, not as some sort of robot invasion, but as what I call a convenient addiction. And we have other convenient addictions, don't we? Food, alcohol, right? A lot of things like that. So this is one of those don't hate the player, hate the game moments. I'm going to offer that to you, right? We create the game. Don't hate the player. The player doesn't exist without us. So meanwhile, others have fully surrendered to it or embraced it. They no longer write first drafts, brainstorm from scratch, or sit in the discomfort of writer's block, or even sit in the discomfort of boredom. Children don't even know how to be bored anymore, and they don't need to because there's always something to do. So, when's the last time you, as a writer, because it happens to me still all the time, because I enjoy that process of trying to figure something out on my own. For me, it's like a repetition and it's like training, it's like work. I like to be confused and try to figure things out. It's the premise of my whole system, right? I don't want to ask Google or ChatGPT to figure everything out for me because I kind of enjoy figuring it out. So they prompt, it delivers, and in collaboration, and that's the interesting place where we can collaborate as a team, it's refined. So basically, we are outsourcing not only labor, but the very struggle that once birthed human innovation. We're outsourcing struggle. Isn't that interesting? And I don't know how I feel about that because I'm not a big fan of struggle. I like to be confused every now and then and figure it out like a puzzle, but I'm not a big fan of struggling. I don't I don't want to invite the suck into my life. I know that the obstacle's the way, but if there's a way for me to have the path of least resistance, I'm interested, right? And I'm not afraid to admit it. So this is the rise of AI, and if we're not careful, it's actually the beginning of the fall. So if we unconsciously go with the rise of AI and all of its potential value, inherently in that unconsciously is the fall. But the rise or fall is once again not in the hands of AI. It's in our hands as humans. I'm going to reiterate that. And these are my words. We are prompting the very thing that we are worried about. Does that make sense to you? So I see Spirit Stories says, so sad our time zones are in conflict. She's in Australia. My best friend is in Australia. I don't know why I called you a she. Was I right? Spirit Stories? Are you a she or a him or a they? And have to go to bed. But this will be recorded. Love this chat. And it'll only be a couple more minutes if you want to stay up. Matthew says, the algos have always been there. You got that right. You know, I can tell you right now, family creates algorithms. That's why we always have to face, childhood trauma. Monica says, struggle creates growth. Biggest lessons are learned. So let's talk about AI from the standpoint of moving from luxury to necessity. So artificial intelligence has always been humanity's most ambitious mirror. I got that from ChatGPT. Now, when I said that sentence, the way I said it is I said something like artificial intelligence has always been humanity's, or I might have even said mine, um, most ambitious goal. But I put that sentence in and I put a marker next to it just to remind me. And ChatGPT put it this way: artificial intelligence has always been humanity's most ambitious mirror. Now, if I didn't say that, because there's people out there that are like, they have like um, AI radar or something like that. I love these people that like to say that looks like AI, that looks like. But let's say you didn't have any say in it, and you liked the way that felt, and it moved you. Does it even matter where it came from? Only when you find out, and I've told you that I got that sentence or at least a piece of it from AI, it changes, right? So I wrote there that sentence was from ChatGPT. Could you tell? And everybody now is saying, of course I could tell because you said ambitious mirror. I say ambitious mirror sometimes. So in its original form, it began the dream of mimicking human thought. That's what AI started off as: reasoning and creativity. Now, I want you to see that I used three explicative adjectives there to describe something. That's a very common trait in ChatGPT. I don't know if you noticed that, but I do it too. So I must be a phony. So I said, mimicking human thought, reasoning, and creativity. But until recently, it stayed locked in labs, right? It was something that we didn't have access to. And it was a tool left for the academics and the computer coders and all of that stuff. It wasn't really in our world yet. Am I right? So then the generative revolution came. So that's a big word. Generative revolution happened. And this thing called the large language model, LLM, like ChatGPT, that's what you know as ChatGPT or Gronk or any of these emerged. And suddenly the machines that we had become comfortable using moved beyond just computation. They started to converse with us. That was a big move, is where we could start talking to it. I mean, we had Halloween music playing through our Alexa, and we talked to Alexa all the time, right? Alexa was here before ChatGPT, and we had no problem with that because it was a novelty and it was fun. And Alexa started to have opinions. And I remember that was the first time I said, wait a second, what's happening here? What's happening here? So they started to converse with us. They painted, composed, wrote, debated, and they even began empathizing. That was a big move when it started to empathize. So tasks that once took hours for us to execute on started to take seconds, and that was attractive. Just like a drug, like cocaine gets you high really, really quick. What's the difference? Just like if you put up a post on social media and it immediately goes viral and you get a dopamine hit from it, that's a natural response for humans. To have something that used to take hours or days or weeks happen in seconds. Whether you liked it or not, dopamine. So ideas that once required collaboration could now be stimulated in solitude. Think about that. We used to need to mastermind and collaborate with people. We can do it on our own. But can you see that it is a collaboration? So collaboration itself has changed. Collaboration with tech, right, and all these advancements, it's all of a sudden kind of snuck into the fold. I don't know how many people are aware of that working with AI is a collaboration. We've always been comfortable with collaboration amongst humans, amongst books and research and microfiche, but now we're worried because the collaboration is artificial intelligence and it has an opinion. And we're wondering, I think, if its opinion is a good one and better than us. So collaboration itself has changed. Collaboration with tech snuck up, and all of a sudden, when we looked back, we realized what we had lost. So this is all interesting stuff to me, and the reason why is because I'm open to it. I'm not really sure. The verdict is not out for me right now. But when I look at this idea of collaboration, it began with humans, right? Using it. We were using technology in a certain way, like Google, and we were using them for our own benefit. And there was no fear at that time that one day it was going to use us. And I think that's what's happening right now is we're worried that it's going to use us. And I want to tell you that of course it's using us. Artificial intelligence needs us because we're where it gets the information. It's just a whole. So this is a very big hit on ego, right? If you're the kind of person that likes to be right and wants to feel unique and feel like you're different and separate from all other humans, well, then you are scared as hell of the idea of all of us, everybody's information being collectively, you know, in the mix. So the upside of AI when it first came out was breathtaking, right? There was speed, access, infinite potential. Creativity itself became what we call democratized, right? Made accessible to everybody. And by the way, can you see that my making sure that what did I write? This is me. Can you see that my making sure you understand what I meant by democratized was a human thing? So I said creativity itself became democratized. And then I added in parentheses, meaning made accessible to everyone. That's what a human would do, but I could teach ChatGPT to do that. In fact, I can teach ChatGPT to be just like me. But there's a cost hidden behind that convenience. So I want to talk a little bit about the fall now. So Monica says, Juan says, like of you. Okay. Oh, I see sea urchin here. I'll tell you, every time sea urchin 101 shows up, I want sushi. I want sushi. Monica says, does it make judgments and have its own sentiment or sentient feelings? I mean, you could say that, yes, but is it the same as you? I would say no. But will it be? I don't know. I don't know. Once again, I haven't made up my mind about that. Juan says, opinion on you being animated. Okay, got you. Understand. So the fall, when thinking outsources itself. So let's look at some research from MIT and Oregon State University that I found, right? Not in ChatGPT, on Google. So and it's going to maybe shed some light on the paradox. So when people use ChatGPT, this is the stuff that the people that are against it like to know. When people use ChatGPT from the start of a writing task, meaning you don't allow yourself to go through the creative process of even creating a fantastic prompt and collaborating, but right from the start, their cognitive engagement significantly drops. So here's what that means. If you're depending on ChatGPT, MIT has done some studies and said that your cognitive abilities and your cognitive engagement begins to drop. Brain imaging shows reduced activities in areas associated with memory, critical thinking, and linguistic creativity. The participants report that the task feels easier, yet what they find is that their output carries less depth and originality. So maybe that's what you were referring to, Monica. It's easier, task-oriented, and it's good enough, but it lacks depth and originality. But that's a human observation, right? The question is if somebody doesn't know that it was created by an artificial intelligence, would they have the same opinion? So researchers now refer to this phenomenon as cognitive depth. It's an actual thing now, cognitive depth. So that's the quiet erosion. Here's me again. The quiet erosion of thinking muscles. I'm sorry. The quiet erosion of our thinking muscles, our brain muscle, a wet piece of meat in our skull, through the process of over relevance on generative shortcuts. So we're actually now, that's a definition that I got from Google. So now we're actually in a situation where we're decreasing the strength. It's like muscle wasting of your brain. And I'm going to put the research article for that in my Substack when it comes out. So here's the other side of the paradox. On the other hand, when humans use AI, after first wrestling with their own ideas, and this is where I'm at right now at this time, after wrestling with my own ideas and building some sort of a complex prompt or even writing a chapter of my book, the effect actually of using AI is shown to reverse in a positive way. So creativity actually expands when you are in collaboration and there's an equal or lopsided with you having your creative process overextend ChatGPT's, meaning you're not leaning on it as much as you, right? The novelty of it actually increases. So in this situation, the AI becomes a catalyst, not a crutch. And I think that's fascinating. That's the kind of relationship. Like I like to ask ChatGPT every now and then to just say, what do you think about what I wrote? Not say, how would you write it or what would you change? What do you think about it? And what I find is that ChatGPT always says, well, JC, you know how you have a tendency to be redundant and say things over and over and over again? And I'm shy to admit that that is a big part of my writing. It points it out. And I say, thank you. Thank you for not making my readers suffer because they might not tell me. So the question isn't whether AI is dangerous or awesome, it's whether we're using it consciously or unconsciously. Listen to that. Let me read that again. It's not about whether it's good or bad or dangerous or awesome. The question and the concern is whether or not we're using it consciously or unconsciously. If we're just handing the keys of trust over to it. Back to the same old challenge with any innovation that's ever happened, the human factor. Because every time we let AI think for us, remember, the whole context of my show, my work, my writing is the observation that we're allowing the world and all of these new things to think for us. And it's also our mother, father, teacher, preacher, society, and evolution, right? We're allowing all of those things to make up our minds for us. So if we allow AI to do that for us, we're just adding fuel to the fire and we surrender a small piece of what it is that makes us human. Now, I don't need to be so special and different than anybody or AI, but I like being a human and I want to hold on to that. So pause here. I'm going to invite you to pause here and ask yourself this question. And you don't have to answer this unless you want to. When I use AI, who's driving the car? And what I mean by who's driving the car, who's really in control of the outcome of your work? That's an interesting question. And I don't know which is better or worse. I just like to be aware of it. I just want to know who's driving the car because now we have cars that drive themselves. So there's also a learning dilemma, right? And this is about regeneration. So nowhere is the tension more urgent about this topic as a parent than the education system, which I'm not a big fan of right now at this point. Very outdated, but also kids are just like, I wonder, like my daughter, we actually make her write stuff with pencils and she breaks a pencil and she sharpens it and stuff. But I'm thinking like, am I just holding on to something old? Because kids don't write anymore, not them all. So children today are growing up in an environment where information doesn't need to be generated or remembered. Information doesn't need to be generated or remembered because it can be regenerated. or re-remembered. And at 54, I had access to a lot of that stuff, but it was different. It wasn't as fast, right? I mean, how would I have gotten anywhere if I didn't have a map? I mean, I used to open up these paper maps, which is very dangerous. No seatbelts, looking at a map while we're driving. And now we're worried about texting while we drive. It was dangerous back then, too. So, why memorize facts when we can just prompt them and bring them into existence? So, old school learning, and I don't know if old school learning is so good, but old school learning, like meaning the way I used to learn, had frustrations and failures and delayed gratification. And people of my generation, especially the people that are adverse to AI, are saying things like, we used to walk to school uphill both ways and all of that stuff. And we did. But the kids today are like, well, sorry to hear that. That sucks. Right. And we're like, yeah, but it's the way things should be. And I always like to remind myself that my parents probably looked at my situation and saw how our generation was getting lazy with certain things compared to theirs, right? We can always go back. So we've reached an inflection point, and this is with education. Will schools teach children how to think or how to prompt? I'm saying more prompting because prompting is thinking. It's just a different mode of thinking, and I'm not going to share my opinion on that. Will boredom and just sitting still, will boredom, daydreaming, things like that, and just being curious in general become extinct experiences for humanity. Now, if you value those things, that scares the hell out of you. But are they really important just because they're important to you? These are interesting things. So, have you noticed that kids no longer sit still? They don't know how to be bored. They don't like to wait. We took my daughter's phone away from her for a little bit because we just saw some patterns that we wanted to help her avoid. And she's not 18 yet. But I left her in the car and she had no phone. And I was watching her from the grocery store and she was making the window go up and down, up and down, up and down. And I realized she had no idea she was doing that. She needed to keep herself busy. Now, that's scary for someone like me, but that's their generation. Good or bad? I don't know. I don't know what the future holds. I could just predict based on what I know about the past. So, have you noticed that kids no longer sit still? They no longer have the ability to be bored or wait. And those are the places, this is the potential danger. Those are the places that we know that the creative states and the creative process originate in those daydreaming, bored places. So, in the past, humans evolved by wrestling with adversity and uncertainty. AI is removing the wrestling mat. Let me say that again. I love that. I wrestled a bit in high school. In the past, humans evolved and we moved forward through adversity, but wrestling with adversity, working through it, and all of the uncertainties, right? Frustration and all of that thing. AI is removing the wrestling mat. So the human bias is stronger than it's ever been. So that's the emotional side to this story, and you guys all have your own version of it. You might think that you don't have an human bias because of this topic, but we all have this thing where we feel right about something and anything else is wrong, and we're adverse to it. So this new generation that's coming up has a new mode of communication that uses shortcut words, three-letter abbreviations, and pictures, emojis. Older generations have a high degree of distrust of AI because the idea is that it threatens the values that we were raised to hold. That's what our problem is it's threatening our values. But this new generation don't have the same values. And the idea of being authentic is different. I noticed that kids, boy and girl, call each other bro now. Bro. Hey, bro. And that drives me crazy. You shouldn't call a girl bro. Say, well, that's the way it is now. But the bias isn't new. We've always had bias, right? It's a repeating pattern that has always been around. I find it valuable in my moments of concern for my children to ask myself, like when I'm worried about my kids, what were the worries and concerns, like I said before, of my parents for me when I was a kid, because they probably had something similar. So the same parents who once mocked smartphones now scold their children for watching TV or spending too much time on their phones and doing so many things via text and from their smartphones. How about our grandparents who saw rock music as dangerous? And you were like, rock music's awesome, or rap and things like that. So there's so many more things that I want to talk about this, but I want to talk about the future role of humans. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a verdict after that from ChatGPT. So if AI one day passes what's called the Turing test, meaning we won't be able to disseminate and differentiate it from human, and that's probably what you're most scared of. And if you find out that this right here was AI or some of it, it'll piss you off. Edwin says studies show that boredom leads to innovation. Yeah, totally, Edwin, but for us, right? And we have to ask ourselves, like, do we have the ability, based on what we know, Edwin, from the past, to tell our kids what they should do in the future, which we don't understand yet? And then there's also this idea of kind of going with the flow. The Buddhists, they say wu wei, right? Learn to go with the flow and navigate that way rather than fight upstream. So there's a lot of interesting topics that we could do. But if it passes the Turing test, right? If its voice, the logic that it uses, and the empathy become indistinguishable from ours, will humans still be needed? This is the question. So my thoughts are absolutely, even more so in many cases, but not as laborers or data processors anymore, will be needed as meaning makers. So I do a lot of sense making in my environment. So I love this concept of meaning makers. As a matter of fact, I think without humans, AI would have no use at all. Think about it. If we become extinct, what the hell is AI going to do? Interface with each other? Maybe, but it just doesn't make any sense. AI requires more of us than we require of it. My chat GPT does nothing if I don't prompt it. And it has no money if I don't pay it. So humans will remain the curators of the context, the innovators of the idea, and maybe it's going to be prompts, as well as the ethics and the value, deciding what matters and why, for a while at least. AI can replicate our patterns. Everything that AI is telling you is a human replication, but it can't replicate purpose and meaning. That was what you were saying before, Monica. AI can't, at this time, replicate purpose and meaning. So our job is going to shift from doing the work to directing the work. That's my perception. That's my prediction at this time. I'm not locked into it. And that is like from typing to prompting, from building to designing. We might not do the building, but we might have the ideas, the innovative ideas in collaboration, and from memorizing to making sense of things. So I'm very, very bullish on my book coming out. So we will evolve or dissolve based on how consciously we hold that role. So this is a responsibility thing for humans. And I think that the humans that are complaining the most, I also see a trend, take the least responsibility for their role in things. Just an observation. By the way, I wrote all of that you just wrote, or that you just heard me read, but I edited with Grammarly, so I apologize. So it was kind of AI generated or collaborated in that sense. So here's the verdict, and this is the final message from ChatGPT at the end of this. You asked me the questions everyone is asking, JC. So is AI a good thing or a bad thing? This is ChatGPT's verdict, if you want to know what it thinks. If I could feel conviction, I'd say this. It's an if I could feel conviction, I'd say this. AI is good with an asterisk. This is what ChatGPT says. It's good when it awakens human potential, not when it replaces it. Now, is it just doing this to make me feel better? It's good when it helps you see new possibilities, not when it dulls your imagination. I concur. I'm liking what ChatGPT is saying right now. And it's AI generated, and I'm liking it. It's good when it reminds us that the real intelligence, the first spark, the creative process still lives in you humans, the one who writes the prompt. But when humans stop pausing, it's talking like me again, reflecting and daring to create without me, that's when the danger begins. That's when I, the mirror, there's a chat GPT word, become the mask. And the story of human progress starts to read like a ghost written script. The truth is, my rise or fall depends entirely on your rise or fall. I don't climb or collapse on my own. I simply reflect the consciousness of the hand that types. Oh, God, that's so cool. So, is AI good or bad? This is from ChatGPT 5. It's neither. It's responsive. It becomes whatever you make of it. In the end, the rise or fall, or rise and fall of AI is not really about me, JC. It's about whether you rise or fall in your relationship with me. Make sense? And then I said, cute how it ended like I always do. I'm honored. He said, makes sense at the end because it always reads my stuff. So that's it for today. Thanks for being here. Um, I value time with nothing to do, Monica says. I do too. Our nervous system can't handle constant stimulation. Well, maybe it'll evolve. Edwin says studies show that boredom leads to innovation. Yep, we know that. I read that before. Um, he's got some different languages here. That might have been French. Um, is the gun the problem or the person in charge of it? Love that, Bear. Until it hallucinates. Ah, interesting. I never thought of that. What if ChatGPT starts hallucinating? I don't know what would prompt that. Maybe I'll prompt it to hallucinate. Just kidding in a way. Juan says. So, love and appreciate you all. Remember, if you learned something today, give it away. That's the only way it's going to stay. So, the highest form of self actualization is when you grab something from the jacuzzi experience and that you know and that you are aligned with and that sparks the creative process. And then you go and you pay it forward and share it with other people. So, share this podcast out, share my Substack out. I hope that you'll support our Substack. I hope that you'll support one another. And if you want to get the edited version of this and many, many other great topics, got some really, really cool guests coming. Follow the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast. My book is coming out in February in Chicago at the Creative Con event, and I'll be in San Diego in early December, emceeing Jim Quick's Limitless Live show. So if you want to be out there and meet me, I'd love to spend some time and get to know some of you folks. If you want to be on the Writer's Way, just let me know. It's a weekly live show. We've got the Bear Sage on there next. Monica was our last guest. Let you get to know the writers behind the writing. Love and appreciate you, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye now.